Hey guys, and welcome to This Is Now. Pokémon Sword and Shield come out on the Switch today, and while it should be one of the most exciting days of the year for Pokémon fans, it's more than a little bit bittersweet thanks to some, shall we say, controversial decisions on Game Freak's end. Look, for me, my love of Pokémon goes deep. I've been playing Pokémon literally since I was like 6 years old. And while the games have been incredible and the games have been great, there's no doubt that things have gotten a little stale, right? I mean, there's a very rigid formula in the games, and I understand that over the years, Game Freak has tried to shake it up and introduce new forms and new ideas. I don't know, I mean, Mega Evolutions are cool. What was the other thing? What was it after Mega Evolutions?
Z-moves.
Z-moves, those are dumb.
I don't like Z-moves.
Z-moves are dumb.
Yeah.
But now we've got Mega Gigantamax. You know, I would talk a lot of shit about this right now. However, I think Pokemon's had lots of really weird, like some Pokemon, like the way they evolve and all kinds of stuff. Or like do you remember trying to catch a Feebas?
Yeah.
That was like the most infuriating thing of any Pokemon game, where there's like one tile that changes once a day and one. But to understand it all, we have to go back to the beginning, where Sword and Shield were announced back in February of this year. Fans were excited because to combat a negative reaction to the very simplified remake of Pokemon Yellow, Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, Game Freak wanted to make sure to let everyone know that hey, they're also working on a brand new mainline follow-up to Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, which will be coming out this year. Now that turned out to be a pretty smart move, since while the Let's Go games were fun, they ended up cutting out a lot. Things like random battles in the wild were removed to make way for a Pokemon Go-esque catching encounter, the Pokedex was slashed down to the original 151 in their Alolan forms, and the entire game was made just generally easier so younger people could find a new entry point into the series. Personally, while it was nice to play, realistically, we've been to Kanto many times, and I kind of enjoyed it. But I also made it about halfway through the game and haven't touched it in the year since, so it's cool, but I don't know. I guess I'm a hardcore Pokemon fan. I'm an old school Pokemon fan. I want to actually battle wild Pokemon. I want to go get my 8 gym badges in, what's the new region? Galar? Galar?
Yeah, England.
England. But of course, as we all now know, things pretty much went downhill from Pokemon Let's Go. So the first controversy to come out of the Pokemon Sword and Shield reveal in February came down to graphics. Now with the jump to new hardware almost 3 years into its life cycle, fans were rightfully expecting Sword and Shield to be a big leap forward for the franchise, similar to the jump between Black and White and X and Y. I know while obviously the DS games hung around for quite a while, when you jumped up to 3DS, it was like, whoa, look at those graphics, this is revolutionary. It was good. So when the reveal trailer dropped and it made Sword and Shield look like a slightly up-res Sun and Moon, fans were not happy. So the main meme being used to represent the graphical updates, or rather the lack thereof, was a screenshot of a tree taken from the early area. Now at first people were putting it side by side with a picture of a tree from Breath of the Wild, but then they put it next to a tree from Ocarina of Time. Yes, putting a tree from a Pokemon game released in 2019 next to a tree from a game released in 1998 was an actual comparison people could make. Now to be fair, of course, graphics aren't everything, and at the end of the day, it's gameplay that really matters. But one of the key criticisms against the Pokemon franchise for a long time now is that the games are slow in adding new features and genre trends. On top of that, most new features, like having a Pokemon follow you or Mega Evolutions, don't really impact gameplay in a meaningful way, and they only tend to be included for 1 or 2 games before being replaced with something else. For example, instead of Mega Evolutions or Z-moves, Sword and Shield features Dynamaxing, which allows you to battle with a giant hologram of pretty much any Pokemon you want. Now Nintendo probably made the smart move and didn't really offer much of a response to any of the criticism, so it generally died down until around E3. During the Treehouse Live presentation of the game, Nintendo revealed that like Let's Go, Sword and Shield wouldn't support all 800 plus Pokemon that have been created since Red and Blue. Now this really was the final straw for fans who expected to take advantage of the upcoming Pokemon Home app, which is supposed to allow you to freely transfer your Pokemon between games all the way from the digital versions of Red and Blue, all the way up to the most recent generation. I mean, that's always been one of the major strengths of the mainline Pokemon games. You've had literally all the Pokemon available, and even though, yes, certain generations such as 3rd gen didn't allow you right out of the box to import older Pokemon, there was at least all the Pokemon data in the game. You could trade them eventually with things like Pokemon Coliseum and Leaf Green and everything, but this time around, short of some like firmware update, the games straight up do not have the data for many of the older Pokemon. Between Pokemon Go, Pokemon Let's Go, as well as Sword and Shield, all having different sets of usable Pokemon, the app really is a holding cell for whenever the games start to support all the old Pokemon again. Now, according to Game Freak, the reason for the reduced Pokedex is that the higher graphical fidelity of the Switch allowed them to create new battle and idle animations, which of course takes time to do, especially when you have 800 plus Pokemon, so they made the sacrifice so that the game would be ready for launch. Or at least so they claim. Of course, fans were immediately dubious of this, and in early July, a user posted a thread contradicting it. First, they showed a clip of the main character speaking with their rival matched up with an animation of the rival from Sun and Moon, which is identical. Isn't that slightly suspicious? And then they showed a video of a new Pokemon using Tail Whip, which was again the same animation from Sun and Moon. They also compared the Tail Whip animation from Sword and Shield to the original Pokemon Stadium game on N64, and yeah, it doesn't look great. Now, Dynamax Pokemon also have these same animations as their smaller counterparts, but they're just slowed down. Now, at this point, the internet, not too pleased. And if you can believe it, things continue to get even worse, as outrage tends to do. On November 4th, the Reset Era user Joski posted a grid featuring every single Pokemon in the National Pokedex with the returning Pokemon highlighted in green. As it turned out, Game Freak was absolutely ruthless when deciding which Pokemon they were going to cut. Pretty much every starter aside from Charmander, because of course, didn't make the cut, on top of fan favorite legendaries like Mewtwo, Ho-Oh, Lugia, all the legendary birds. Even Dragonite didn't make the cut. Man. Now, if we get a little bit deeper into speculation, there were a lot of rumors in the early part of the Switch's life cycle that Game Freak were going to be remaking the Ultra Sun and Moon games for the Switch, mostly because they were afraid that the Switch wasn't actually going to sell. Now, when it became very obvious that the Switch was a big seller, it seemed like their sort of strategy got moved around a little bit. So Pokemon Let's Go showed up, which were admittedly pretty fun games, but they were very, very simple. And instead of doing a Ultra Sun and Moon remake, they started working on Sword and Shield. Now, it makes sense if they had already started prepping, sort of moving the 3DS game over to the Switch, that they would want to renovate or reuse a lot of the same models, a lot of the same moves, a lot of the same animations from the Ultra Sun and Moon games. I mean, yes, the Switch is obviously much more powerful than the 3DS, but these games are fairly complicated. Remaking 800 plus Pokemon is a lot of work, but the downside here is that, yes, it's great to have a new Pokemon game every year, but is it really worth it to have something which, by all accounts, seems to be a little empty? There's lots of cases of like buildings that feel like they totally should be fleshed out, dungeons which are like 5 minutes long. Like, there's so much to this game that seems to be a little bit cut short. It seems like Game Freak just had to rush it out the door. And while it's great because some parts of the game do seem to legitimately be solid, but a lot of the game just seems to be not quite there. That brings us to today. The reviews of Sword and Shield have dropped, with some of them calling it the best Pokemon game yet, and others calling it a hollow shell of what the franchise once was. But overall, to be fair, the scores have been pretty solid, with a current Metacritic score of 84%. Game Freak didn't get much time to rest on their laurels though, as the game is officially out in the wild now, and because of that, it has found its way into the hands of data miners. So the statement from Game Freak about the models and animations in Sword and Shield being built from scratch is starting to come back to bite them once again, as the data miners were able to pull out the exact models of some of the Pokemon in the game, and after comparing them to models pulled from the 3DS games, it looks like they are functionally identical. To really drive the point home, here's a video of Scorbunny's third evolution using Double Kick. Not only is it a kind of terrible animation, but it's the same one we've been seeing for the past few games in the series. Now, all of these videos, of course, are making their way through Twitter, as hashtag GameFreakLied has been the top trend on the platform lately, and it's like, man, it's a mess, because obviously the internet gets salty. They get upset sometimes. Although, to be honest, I actually kind of feel like all this criticism has been pretty similar to a lot of other releases of other Pokemon games. So what exactly makes this so different? Well, probably this is because this is the first time we're supposed to get a flagship Pokemon game on a full console, not just a limited handheld. Now, it is good that Game Freak has made some strides, like being able to skip the awful tutorials, or having an open world. When you compare the scale of Pokemon Sword and Shield to something like Breath of the Wild, Matt can't help but feel like he was cheated out of his money. I'm curious, do you think the internet is overreacting with this stuff? And also, let me know exactly how old I am in the comments below by letting me know what your first generation of Pokemon was. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You can check out some of our other episodes here and here. If you don't actually check out those episodes, I'm not sure what will happen because Matt's not here today, so he didn't write an outro for me. Although, he could just give me an ending. Everything else is here. I don't know what to do without Matt. It's weird. Matt, I miss you. Come back, please.